cowboy hat because I'm a cowboy. People want to know how are you a cowboy in Indiana? Well,
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
I found out, Robert. All you gotta do is I'll buy a Stetson, and you're in. You're in the club, man.
I grew up in New Mexico, so I was surrounded by cowboys.
Now, how is it people dare say I'm a fake cowboy? I don't even get that. Look, I got the twang going on. Southern, I got the white earp looking stash thing going on. I got the hat. What else? I got the country western shirt button down, and these aren't buttons. These are snaps, man. Because real cowboy, he don't like them buttons because you're out there roping the doggies. Yep. You got to rip that thing off.
Yeah, you're out there rodeoing, and it's kind of tough to be, bothering with buttons.
And that is Indiana Unexplained right there. and now we segue right into Mexico Unexplained. Robert, welcome to the program. Now, why don't you just give a brief introduction of yourself to the Edge audience?
Yeah, my name is Robert Bitto, and I've owned an import company for the past 19 years, and I deal primarily with Mexico and other parts of Latin America. And over the course of doing business in Mexico primarily, I've run across some pretty strange things, here and there. And stories and, seeing things, reading things and stuff. And a lot of the things that I've been exposed to on my buying trips and traveling around the country, I haven't really heard of in the United States. And so with my podcast, Mexico Unexplained, my YouTube channel and my book, and let me show the book here, and my book, I explore what I call the magic, the mysteries, and the miracles of Mexico. And that's about it. The topics are endless. So I divide them into categories, and we can talk pretty much about anything you want.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to go right into exorcisms. Now, have you ever witnessed one, or you just know that there's a high percentage of people getting exorcisms in Mexico?
I have never witnessed an exorcism myself, but Mexico has more exorcists than any other country on earth. And it is not the most Catholic country. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of exorcisms going on. There's one man he's in his 80s, a Catholic priest, and he's done over 6,000 exorcisms.
Wow!
In the course of his life, yeah.
Okay, now that's a lot of demon getting rid of right there.
Yeah, and I don't know if a wall can keep him out either. So build a wall. I don't know.
Okay, now, when it comes to exorcisms, man, why is it always like Catholic priests getting in on the action? Where's the Protestants in the fun of exorcism?
Well, I guess because the Catholic Church has a huge, long history of doing exorcisms, and they were big on it in the past, and now it's becoming more and more popular. I have heard of Protestants or even New Agey type of people doing exorcisms too, but when it comes to Mexico, it's pretty much 100% the Catholic Church.
Well, they seem to have a lock on it, man. It's always kind of bugged me about that. But when they're casting out, I guess demons, right?
Right.
Have they ever told you what type of demons they're casting out there?
Well, it depends. Yeah, there's several. They all come from the nether world, hell, whatever you want to say.
Mm-hmm. Call it hell.
But and they're all, there are different types of them from what I understand.
Okay.
So there are quite a few roaming around Mexico looking for people to inhabit. That's the thing that they have said.
That's rather
and
odd.
There's part of the folk wisdom, I guess you would say, and not the church's official stance, is that ever since abortion was legalized in Mexico, they believe that for every abortion that happens, a demon is released from hell.
Wow.
And it comes out. Yeah. That's folk wisdom. It's not the church dogma. Mm-hmm. So people believe that there were a lot of demons running around because of that. And then other things too. They believe that people are opening up portals or making themselves vulnerable to being possessed more than ever now, especially little kids. I was reading a very interesting article about how little kids now in Mexico, because their society is like the United States, in that now two parents work. It used to be where the mom stayed home until very, very recently. In the United States, it was the 70s when it started to change. But in Mexico, it's only been recently, like within the past 15 or 20 years. So there are a lot of kids that have a lot of time on their hands. And what's the saying go? Idle hands or playthings of the devil or whatever. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of child possessions going on, they're saying, in Mexico because of different games that are being played and kids are not being supervised. Mm-hmm. So whenever you have a situation like that, you open up you're more susceptible. You're more open to being possessed, I think.
Now, would you consider... you have in the New Orleans, you have a lot of black magic and white magic and voodoo all mixed together. It's a cornucopia or a freak show down there. But when you get down to Mexico, is there one sort of central dark religion that they have, or is it a hodgepodge sort of like New Orleans?
Well, it's interesting what's happening in Mexico, and they've had several visits from popes. So the Pope is like shaking his finger at them. Pope Benedict XVI and also Pope Francis visited Mexico specifically to address the millions of people who are now turning to these darker saints, these folk saints, specifically what they call the Santa Muerte. And if you look at the Santa Muerte, it looks just like a Grim Reaper. And so you pray to the Santa Muerte when nothing else works for you. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty hideous looking thing. And wow. People say it works. And unlike the Catholic saints, you can use the Santa Muerte to get revenge and to put curses on people. Mm-hmm. So you can do that too. But a lot of people, they say, when you ask them why they believe in this most holy death, that's what that means, Santa Muerte or Santísima Muerte. Mm. Why do you believe in this hideous thing? They say, well, because nothing else works. Mm. So when you have a breakdown in the family, you have the church is not listening to the needs of the people. Maybe they're not being as responsive to their communities as they used to. Everyone's overworked, I guess. If that's not working, and then traditional prayer isn't working, you pray to St. Jude, the patron saint of impossible causes, or in Mexico also they pray to, his name is Saint Charbel Malouf, and he was canonized by the church. He lived in Lebanon in the 19th century, I believe, and he is the patron saint of lost causes. If St. Jude doesn't work for you, then you pray to St. Charbel. And so if St. Charbel doesn't work for you, then you go to the Santa Muerte. Oh, and there's also another saint, a folk saint called Jesus Malverde. And he is more of a patron saint of narcotraficantes, the drug traffickers. Mm-hmm. And he was, if you ever watched that series Breaking Bad, filmed in my hometown of Albuquerque, in the series Breaking Bad, he was the little statue of a man with a mustache that the drug dealers had, or whatever, the Mexican cartels. Mm-hmm. But he's like a Robin Hood figure, and he was shot by the government, and now people pray to him because he was a bandit. He was a bandit in the early part of the 20th century. Mm-hmm. And
did he really
was
go
shot.
Away?
What was that? I'm sorry.
Did he really go away?
Well, depends on what you believe. A lot of people believe that his spirit, of course, is still here. That's why they pray to him.
Let me ask you
but the Catholic Church says no. And that's Pope Francis and Pope Benedict XVI. That's one of the reasons why they went to Mexico.
Every time I hear Benedict, I think eggs. But we'll talk about demons and spooks of all kinds, and obviously you say there's a lot of belief in that and activity of that in Mexico. Now here in the civilized United States, with our armed forces filled with transvestites, but here in the United States, are we too culturally arrogant to think that all of these things are nothing and that those things do not exist? Or do they exist in our realm, but they masquerade as something that maybe a cell phone or a Wi-Fi signal? I mean, is it something like that? Or are they still here?
Well, it depends on what you believe. I think a lot of people in Mexico, they're just predisposed to believe in supernatural stuff. For some reason, it's part of the culture. In our culture in North America, in the United States, traditional American culture, we're not so, I don't know, what do you want to say, suckered in, or we don't really pay attention to that sort of thing. We're not, I guess, superstitious in that kind of way, if you want to use the word superstitious. I don't know, but people do believe that those same forces are here, but we're just oblivious to them. But in Mexico, there's such a history of two things: the Catholic Church having a really strong presence there, and then also all of these other things that were there before the Spanish came. Mm-hmm. All of the gods, all of the spirits, the Alush, the Chaneque, all of these different things, malevolent forces, they believe that have been there for thousands of years. So I don't know, maybe some people believe it's because Mexico is a much older country. There's been civilization there for a lot longer than there has been in what we call the United States today.
Has anybody ever said you kind of look like a Jacqueline Phoenix?
Oh boy, not recently, but yeah, when Gladiator came out, I had a lot of people come up to me. I remember I was at a gas station pumping gas, and some woman came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, you're the guy from Gladiator." And then I had heard that so many times. I said, "No, but I've been told that I look like Russell Crowe so many times."
Well, that was important. No. That's obviously an important question to tonight's show. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Here's a question for you. And by the way, didn't Hillary Clinton resort to a voodoo doll of Trump?
It wouldn't surprise me. I have no idea.
Okay. Well, evidently it didn't work. Well, I think what happened actually, and there's the thing. Sometimes I understand this was witchcraft in general. If you don't got the right demons protecting you, and you send out a spell, it can boomerang and come back and get you. I mean, I think maybe what happened to her, because obviously she fell down so many times, lost her shoe, coughing fits. She got some kind of backpack keeping her back straight. I mean, the things she's a health mess, and I'm thinking it came back. But anyway, let's get to one of these questions. This from Floor Work. We have two live chats going on.
Right.
Robert, one, this is from our YouTube channel. What do you know about Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo?
Never heard that name before.
I didn't either. But
I'm the first person to admit when I don't know something.
Okay.
And that's actually a good thing, because then I'll go and research it, and whoever this is, then
Yeah. Okay. On your website, you have a couple pictures of mermaids.
Yeah.
Now, is that a Mexican thing?
Well, they believe that there were mermaids called the Tlanchana in the lakes, not seaside mermaids like what we believe. But they believe that there were mermaids in the lakes, and they were more like serpent, half woman, and they do the same things that the mermaids in Western European culture do. They sing songs and lure men to their deaths or temptation or whatever. But yeah, they have mermaids there.
Was that just all stories made up by hard up sailors, or do you think there really is such a creature?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there are a couple of theories as to why we see cryptids. Why we see imaginary creatures and stuff. Are we manifesting it? Is it group hallucination, or are they real? And there are plenty of fabulous creatures, cryptids. Things. Creatures that we think exist, or they might not exist, whatever, in Mexico. And the Tlanchana is one of them. And that goes back probably 3,000 or 4,000 years.
What about sirens? Have you ever heard of them?
Yeah, I guess it's a kind of a variation of a mermaid.
Well, yeah. The only reason the first place I ever heard about a siren was watching Old Brother Where Art Thou, and there was these three sirens in the creek, and they like seduced the three escapee prisoners and then took their money and stuff, turned one into a frog, or turned one into a toad, a horny toad too, by the way. All right, so let's get to the fact, Robert. There's a lot of superstition there. Is there anything to supernatural?
I'm sorry. Is there anything? What
is there any? When we talk about supernatural, is it real or is it just in the mind? Because you mentioned earlier what you believe, if they believe this or if you don't believe that, is that the only variance of whether or not there is supernatural things going on or not? Or is there supernatural and you can either believe it or not believe it?
That is a really good question. I'm starting to believe in some of these things that I've reported on. And it's only because you just hear these stories and you say, well, how the heck could that be? Like, for example, the Tlanchana. There was the mermaid, the lake mermaid. There was a story just like 5 years ago. There was a triathlon that was being held in central Mexico in the lake region, and the swim part of the triathlon went through this lake, and one athlete said that they saw one of these creatures, the mermaid, the Tlanchana. And that's not been as widely reported as some of the other things, like the gigantic owl, the lechuza.
Whoa!
And I know you had what was his name? Cleland.
Yeah, Mike Cleland.
Yeah,
about that.
The guy, the owl guy.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to think that this lechuza, this 7-foot tall owl, is a real thing because I get constant messages from people. It's on a weekly basis. I'll get 1 or 2 messages from people who say, "Oh, I saw that." One guy the other day said that he shot one on his property in South Texas, and I said, "Great, show me the pictures." And he never got back to me. But there are a lot of stories about this gigantic owl that comes and swoops down and tries to kill you, tries to get into your house.
Oh man, well I'll tell you what, I've been debating on now to put out an owl box, because there's a specific box you can build to attract them, and if of course normally in a normal world you attract an owl because they have those beautiful hoots, and they also get rid of rodents too, because there are a lot of rodents are marsupials, man, and you got to just eat them up. But if they're over casting spells or looking at me with a beady eyes, I don't even know. By the way, I think the guy actually said, the owl guy actually said, if you take the feathers away, they look like a scrawny chicken. So I don't know, but it kind of run my view of the owl. But DC Doug, I want the live chat, says, isn't it sexist because there is no, or is there such a thing? Is it sexist, or are mermaids sexist, or is there a such thing as a merman?
In Western European culture, I believe there is a merman, but in Mexico, it's a female, and that's it. There isn't a male Tlanchana.
Are you saying it's a transvestite mermaid?
I don't know.
Hey, man,
if they're all female,
Mexico,
then you have to go transvestite to man. If you see a male Tlanchana, then it's a woman dressing up as a man.
Well, it is Mexico, man. Anything can happen. Remember, what happens in Mexico stays in Mexico. But listen, hey, there's the so-called myth of the Chupacabra. And, I remember the early days of that coming out. That was in the same category as Bigfoot and Mothman and all kinds, Slender Man and all that. And all of a sudden, the Chupacabra started showing up dead on farmers' ranches. So that thing was out there.
Well, a lot of those carcasses have been explained away as coyotes with mange or other big raccoons, things like that. But that whole phenomena has seemed to die out. It's died out by now. It was really popular in the late 90s. And then into the 2000s, there were a lot of sightings. And then it just kind of stopped. Mm-hmm. No one's seeing them anymore. That's what makes me believe in that case. It's kind of maybe like a mass psychosis or whatever you would call it. People are, not necessarily delusional, but they're seeing things and, they're not sure what they're seeing. Mm-hmm. And then they say it's the Chupacabra because they heard about it recently. And since there haven't been any sightings, people are not saying that they're seeing those things. Well, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's the same thing with UFO sightings, is that people are not sure what they're seeing, and then you get they don't know what to do when you get a real credible eyewitness, like an airline pilot or a doctor or a policeman, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what their excuse is then. From the live chat, question come in: have you seen evidence of the elongated skulls?
You know what? That's not a Mexican thing, from what I can understand. The Maya did put cradle boards, I guess, on the foreheads of their babies. Some of them did that. But those elongated skulls that people have been talking about a lot, I believe they're in Peru, in parts of South America. But the Maya did shape the heads of babies in, the ancient times. So that did happen, to flatten the forehead a little bit. Whoa. But as far as, that's the crystal skull. I know what that is. But as far as elongated skulls, I don't believe any have been found in Mexico. Not that I know of any.
Yeah. In South America. But doesn't it appear, though, that those skulls are made with tools that are unknown? Because they say there's no tool marks on them at all.
Well, you're talking about the crystal skulls now? Is that what?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, some of them have been authenticated as being fakes, or experts have come out and said that they're fakes. So crystal skulls, I really haven't looked into them. I'm not inclined to believe that they are what people are claiming that they are, though. But there's a lot of that I see in this field. People want to believe, like the X-Files. There's a lot of wishful thinking going on. And in my work that I do, on my website, my podcast, YouTube channel, book, whatever, I don't really take sides on a lot of stuff. And I'm not one of those people who subscribes to one certain thing that will lead you down one path. And if you believe, let's say, if you believe in the flat earth, you have to go this way. If you believe in the secret space program, then you can't believe in the flat earth. You have to go this way. And, so I keep everything kind of open, and I'm presenting a lot of the information. So that's how I look at it.
I was at a church one time, and I saw somebody getting a devil cast out of them, and their face started contorting. Wow. It was really weird. And
so it does happen here then.
Well, yeah, man. So I don't know that Mexico has a lock on that, just not as much. But my point earlier was, as far as, have we said, we have our cell phones, our TVs, whatnot, our distractions of all kinds, but that doesn't mean the supernatural world isn't there.
Right.
And I'm wondering if the effects of that supernatural world against it manifests in different ways, whereas Mexico, it's more elaborate and it affects them more tremendously. But we have all the technology around, and the doctors and drugs and everything to medicate us out of the supernatural. But I'm wondering if we're still getting the same effects of that supernatural world, but we don't know it.
Yeah, that's possible. I think we have a lot of distractions here now in the United States. But the thing is, Mexico is catching up to us. So, in 10, 15 years, they're going to be the same down there, I think.
Well, man, kind of sad, though. I'd like there to be some kind of supernatural place, man. There's also places called, a thing called thin places, and that is where certain geographical areas that appear to be a doorway or a very thin place between one dimension and another. A lot of places around the world claim to have these. They may not call them thin places, just places where spooky things happen. For instance, in the United States, I would say maybe where there's ghosts, where people say there's ghosts, something's haunted or this and that would be considered a thin place. So it seems that even here in America, and again, I use the term that, we're culturally aware or advanced, but I'm still thinking that we only just medicate ourselves out of the acknowledgement or realization that spiritual world never went away. Look, listen, we're either going to vaporize into nothing or we're going somewhere. And if we go somewhere, there's a supernatural world waiting for us.
Yeah. And, I think in the Protestant tradition, there's not that history that exists in Catholicism that is so cautious about the demonic world and is so aware of it. And a lot of Americans are just not religious anyway. So it could be all out there. And, we're just kind of stumbling around, like you were saying. But what you were saying about thin places, there's one place in Mexico called the Zona de Silencio, the zone of silence, and it's like a Bermuda Triangle down there in the desert. And there's not a lot of information out there in English about this, and not many people outside of Mexico or even outside the region know about it. It's a place where, just like the Bermuda Triangle, things go lost, compasses get all whacked out, and appearances of strange creatures have been reported, along with black triangles in the sky. And some people believe that NASA is doing some weird stuff down there. And it's a protected wilderness, most of it, and a lot of people don't go there. But some people claim that that's one of those thin veil places where their dimensions intersect, or there's a different world or whatever. So they exist down there too.
A lot of people claim that the CERN Hadron Collider is downloaded technology from that netherworld, and it opens portals. But I got to tell you, Robert, if that's the case, we're in for a ride, because I think I read the other day that China is going to build one 7 times larger than the largest one, probably with stolen technology, as they do, and make it 7 times larger. Who knows what kind of army's coming through that thing?
Jeez, yeah, you never know what these secret government projects are doing. We can't see them. It's supposedly our government, our money, but what do we know? We're not cleared or whatever they say.
That kind of reminds me of Jesse Duplantis, the televangelist. He wants $56 million to buy him a new Lear jet of some kind. He already owns 3, but he wants another one because he's got to get his message out in first class. But I'm just wondering, how many of the people that donate for that cause are going to be allowed to ride on his plane? Probably nobody. So,
well, try it. Send in $10 and see what he does. Send it with a note and say, "Hey, look, I want to ride."
Well, right there's a good case for demon possession. Somebody sends money in a case like that. All right. So you how long were you in Mexico?
Well, I was there as a student in 1989, and then I worked there in 1995 in Mexico City. But since 1999, I've owned this import company. So I go down there sometimes 3 or 4 times a year. And I spend a week on, buying trips or whatever and going around the country. And I don't go to the places that people normally go to. So I'm always pushing the envelope and trying to go to that next village or that next place where they're making different things. Most of the stuff I sell are handcrafted items. And so I'm in these little towns and stuff, and that's where I hear the stories. And a lot of it I follow up on and make into these shows. Well, I've spent a lot of time down there.
Well, I'm glad you are. In fact, one of the goals of me and my wife is we have a trailer, and we're going to go to some of these same places. We're going to seek out these kind of places in the United States, these sort of hidden areas. But as far as going down to Mexico, though, I got a little bit of hesitation there, Robert, because it seems like the abduction for cash is a national sport, only exceeded by the city of Phoenix. But I mean, are you ever any danger when you go down there?
You know what? People ask me that all the time. And when I had a store in Phoenix, it's funny you mentioned Phoenix. I had a store in Phoenix for 10 years before I moved out to sunny San Diego, living the life out here in San Diego. But I had a store in Phoenix, and people would always come in. Now I'm just purely internet and catalog, so I don't have interactions with the customers. Customers would always ask me that question. Do you feel unsafe there? And, I never did. I never do when I do go down there. And maybe it's because I'm like kind of a bigger guy or whatever, or people say I look mean. I don't know what it is, but I just don't feel that way.
You just come out of a movie set.
What was that?
You look like you were in a movie, Gladiator or whatever, so there you go. You're getting a pass. I mean, you get a pass. Now the rest of us, man, we got to fight for our lives.
But, ironically, in my colorful little world that I created myself, my store in Central Phoenix, I was held up at gunpoint, tied up and thrown in the back room and had a gun to my head. And, a customer found me, like a half hour later on my side, tied up and everything after getting robbed. So in my own little comfortable, colorful world that I created, my own business, I was in the ultimate danger. And then going down to Latin America, the whole point, I guess, what I'm getting at is you don't know when something bad is going to happen to you. But there are a lot of stories that are exaggerated about how dangerous it is in Mexico. Of course, you don't want to be traveling on the open road at night. That's not a good idea.
Uh-huh.
But if you go to the main cities and you go to like the touristy areas and stuff, that's not a problem, I think, for anyone.
Well, talk about myths or something. I don't know, but I've got this one here. I understand that in Venezuela, things are so bad in that socialist country that they're bringing back cannibalism. I mean, is there human body parts on the store shelves down there? Or is that just made up?
Well, about Venezuela, it's a pretty tragic situation. About body parts, I don't know, but I do know they're eating pigeons and rats.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of prostitution. Yeah. There's prostitution and child trafficking and stuff like that. It's a terrible place to be. If anyone wants to look to an example of, socialism or even statism, if you want to be broader, it's really, it's gone to hell.
I know, man. I know they've already. I know they've already eaten all the zoo animals. But man, if they start eating the little doggies and stuff, that's where I draw the line, man. You can eat a giraffe or something like that, but man, you don't eat a dog. I mean, it's just
they're eating the dogs along with the rats and the pigeons. So man, it's sad.
Wow.
And they're a wealthy country. They have some of the largest oil reserves. There's minerals there. There's forests. There's hydroelectric power. They could tap into that. There's endless rivers. It's a beautiful country, but it just goes to show you what politics can do, or the bad politics, I guess.
Speaking of politics, obviously you've traveled south of the border many times. Are you in favor of Trump's wall or against it?
Okay, that's a personal question, but I will answer it because I have said that. I have made myself known on what I think. Mm-hmm. I believe in the wall because, okay, fine. I don't think that Mexico should be America or the other way around, or America should be more like Mexico. I think you have two distinct cultures, and there's no building a bridge, and we shouldn't, people say build a bridge, not a wall. Well, I don't think you really can do that. Mm-hmm. Well, you have two distinct cultures. How are you going to build a bridge? And why would you want to? Mm-hmm. Keep Mexico. This is what I think, and I know people are going to give me a hard time about this. Keep Mexico, Mexico. Keep the United States, the United States.
Well, the person.
I mean, it's
yeah. Listen, the person that said build walls, not bridges, was the Pope, and he's got a 15-foot wall, armed guards, and hundreds of CCTV cameras preventing people from scaling that wall, and he's talking about don't build walls. So I'll tell you, talk about hypocrites of all hypocrites, man. That comes direct from the source himself. But no, I agree with you. Now, here's the reason why I agree with you on that, and I like the way you frame that. Let Mexico be Mexico. The same way we should have let the Indians be the Indians. But no, when the whites came across the country, we wanted to make them just like whites. We ripped them out of there, put them in our schools, told them to stop speaking their language. They're just now only some of them are trying to go back and trying to restore their language, like Cherokee and such. When I go across the country, I don't want to see, a particular town. I want that town to have its own distinct flavor. I don't want to amalgamate it and wash down with all kinds of other crap. I like the difference. I like to celebrate the difference. But to push everybody together and make them all become one and force that issue, it seems like a no-win situation, as the world's not even going to be interesting at all. It'd be eating like corn. It'd be eating corn every day, man,
And the whole build the bridge, not a wall thing that you hear all the time. Let's let in 50 million Mexicans. People say, just let them all keep coming in. But it's not just having a taco truck on every corner. There are differences in culture that there is no bridge. I'm sorry. When the age of consent in Mexico is 12, the state of Nayarit, it's puberty. Okay, wow. So the age of consent in the United States for the most part is 18. I mean, there's some variations. So if you're going to build a bridge and not a wall, if you're going to have all these people coming in who believe in a different way of life than what you believe, in this case, let's say the age of consent, what do you do when you're building this hypothetical bridge between 12 and 18. Okay, so you're going to let your 14-year-old daughter then have relations with a 35-year-old. That's okay, right? Because we're building a bridge here. We're trying to come together. And so you take two cultures that are very different and you try to merge them. How's that going to look?
Well,
That's my thing. And I mean,
Yeah.
I go down to Latin America all the time and I appreciate the differences. And there are differences that, you know, may be the opposite way too, or going the other way. Like most countries in Latin America, most people I have talked to believe that the whole idea of a nursing home is cruel. Okay. So there's no such thing. You take care of your mom, and it doesn't matter what kind of burden your older relatives are. You take them in. There is no nursing home, whatever. So in America, we have this nursing home culture. So if we build a bridge, not a wall, then what are we going to do? Shut down the nursing homes? What, you know?
Yeah.
See what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
you have distinct cultures, and
well, what you're saying,
I can't see them
I can tell you
blending.
what, from
I'm
what I can
sorry.
see, it's not working for Europe. That's for daggone sure, man.
Yeah.
All right. So we got, you know, and that's what we're talking about in Mexico right now. We're getting away from the old nasty United States. And again, when you talk about the supernatural, there's a lot of entities involved there. And I noticed that when I put a picture that I got of you, and you're holding 3 dolls. What are those dolls?
I don't know which picture that is.
It's on my
I have a
website.
lot of different pictures connected to my store. Were they skeletons?
Yeah, the
maybe?
skeleton-looking things, and then I'm going to segue in, or maybe follow up with a question of, they celebrate the Day of the Dead. What is that?
Right. That's what I think those pictures are. Day of the Dead. It's a holiday that celebrates people who have passed. It's kind of like a Memorial Day, but it has religious undertones, and it dates back to before the Spanish came.
It seems like a sort of a happy time, but it seemed like everybody's walking around in skeleton suits and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a happy time. It's
we-
supposed to be happy, and it's mostly in central Mexico where there was a large indigenous population. And if we can go back to my time in Phoenix, there were a lot of Mexican Americans in Phoenix. Most of them, 100% of them pretty much, had no history in their families of celebrating Day of the Dead, because 95% of the Mexican Americans in Phoenix their ancestry were from the northern states, Chihuahua or Sonora. And in the north, they don't celebrate the holiday. It's only south and central.
Isn't All Hallows Eve a celebration of the dead?
Yeah, and what happened is the Spanish came, and they came to Mexico and saw that the Aztecs were celebrating a death and renewal festival in the springtime. And they made skulls out of cornmeal and blood, human blood. And that was part of the festival. And so wherever Christianity went to, whether it was, you know, going into Ireland or the British Isles, whatever, or to the New World, wherever Christianity went, it had an indigenous population to deal with that already had an established religion. So they had to say, okay, how do we blend the two to soften the blow, to try to make everybody happy? So what they did is they took this death festival that was in the spring, and then they moved it to All Saints Day and All Souls Day, the 1st and 2nd of November. And so that's where the modern day holiday of Day of the Dead, that's where that came from.
Have you ever been the victim of a spell?
Sometimes I think I have been. I don't know. There was one time in my store where somebody from Mongolia came in, and I think she put a curse on me.
Whoa.
That doesn't have anything to do with Mexico. That has to do with my store, though. An artist came in, and she was trying to sell paintings. And I said, I'm sorry, this doesn't fit the theme of my store. If you were painting the Virgin of Guadalupe or something Mexican, you know, maybe I could buy something from you, but I'm not. I'm sorry, it's great, but I can't buy it. And then she got all upset with me and said, you think I'm a bad artist and all this. And I'm like, no, I didn't say that. And then she started doing all this stuff with her, you know, doing all this weird stuff and saying things in her language. And I thought she put a curse on me. I don't know.
I had a guest a few weeks ago do that to me on the show, man. She was doing like this. And I didn't know what. I thought, man, I'm getting a spell. There's some kind of spell coming across the internet, man. I got to watch out. But no, there's a Bible passage that says there's something about the prince, the power of the air, and I'm wondering if that is referring to demons that are airborne and that type of thing. It sounds like there's in every culture some kind of acknowledgement of this vast spiritual conspiracy world out there. And I don't know that just not believing makes it go away. I think in today's culture in the United States, if you see something and say something, then you're liable to be taken to the psych ward and given psychotropic drugs, and you're only medicated. And I'm just wondering that is the system's response to demon possession.
Yeah, and I know you're familiar with Freeman's show, because I think you saw me on his show, or you heard me on his show. Freeman actually interviewed a guy, a clinical psychologist who worked in and I don't know what the politically correct term is, insane asylum, and he was seeing patterns in people in their their symptoms and what they were saying and their behaviors and everything. And he was actually pursuing research that this is actual, possession by entities, whether they're demons or from other dimensions or alien, whatever. He was actually looking at that. And he's like the only person who is, from a scientific perspective, who's actually looking at this stuff like this. Yeah. And I was blown away when I heard all of that. It was an amazing interview. If you can, get a chance to look that up.
Years ago, Freeman was on this show, and he talked about how he lived a life on synchronicities, and at that point I never even heard of that. And then now that I understand what synchronicities are, I have seen a bunch of them, and I'm just wondering if the supernatural is the same way. You when we talk about whether you choose to believe or you don't, I think maybe you either acknowledge, be aware. People talk these days about being awoke, whatever that means, but if you're awoke in this matter, then you'll see a lot of synchronicities, or you may see shadow people in the peripheral of your vision, or you may see the Chupacabra, or you may see other things. And then if you choose not to, then, or don't train yourself or to allow the possibility that such things exist, you never will. And to me, that's a pretty boring life. I mean, I'm fairly excited when I see a synchronistic event, and I've seen tons of them, and I could probably write a book about them now. And it just tells me that the life that we live isn't just A to Z and you're done. It seems to be, I mean, at least the Indians believe life is circular. Probably so the Hindus. You got to keep coming back. But I mean, there's just seems like there's something more. And if we allow ourselves to just not, you don't have to worship the devil. And I think that's the thing. People say, well, if you allow the existence of these things, then you're calling them the devil. No, I said, no, you're not. If they're there, they're there.
Well, I think we have to give ourselves, and we don't do this in America, we have to give ourselves permission to wonder and maybe not come to conclusions. People always try to I don't know what the word is, buttonhole me, pigeonhole me, whatever, try to nail me down and say, what do you believe in this and this and this? You've researched this, you've been to this place, you've felt this. What do you believe in? What is it? Damn it. I need an answer. What is it? No, a lot of times I just say, no, just wonder about it. Maybe there isn't a definite explanation. Mm-hmm. It's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to just wonder about things.
Are there a high percentage of UFO sightings in Mexico?
They're becoming more and more frequent, and I think that's just a function of now everyone has a cell phone. So, and then they're concentrated areas of population. So Mexico City, let's say, it has 22 million people or something. So that's 22 million pairs of eyes. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of eyes that can look up into the sky and see something. Mm-hmm. And now in the past 10 or 15 years, there's this site on the internet called Webcams de Mexico, and they put up webcams all over the country, and these webcams are catching all of these different things that can't be explained, orbs, mysterious flying things, whatever, and especially around volcanoes. In fact, the main volcano in Mexico, outside of Mexico City, Popocatépetl, and they call it Popo for short. It's always kind of like smoking a little bit, just a little bit here, a little bit there, nothing threatening. It's not going to be like a Pompeii situation. But there was one morning show in Mexico that had the Popo watch. What's the mountain doing today? Mm-hmm. And it was a live camera, and in front of millions of people, an orb went out of the mouth of the volcano, and then flew around the volcano. Wow. And that was on live television. Mm-hmm. And you can go online and look it up or whatever. Yeah, but and it seems like there are a lot of UFOs connected with the volcanoes.
I've seen, well, they're probably coming out of there, man. But I've seen a lot of videos of UFOs that are from Mexico, including some from the Mexican Air Force. And I didn't know there was such a thing.
Right.
So it seemed to me they were a lot more open about it there. And I'm, of course, this country, everybody's running around trying to hide, everything's secret up here, really. So,
in fact, the government down there was a flap, I guess, if you would say in UFO terminology. There was the Mexican Air Force off the coast of the state of Campeche in the Gulf of Mexico, mm-hmm. and they were making their usual runs looking for small planes that were smuggling drugs. And they came across, I think it was 6 or 7 orbs or bright lights that were moving in formation, and they had it all on tape. And I did a show about it called The Mexican Air Force versus the Flying Saucers. And it's an interesting story because I believe it's the first time that a national government acknowledged that there is the possibility of UFOs. And what they did is they tapped into the knowledge and the resources of kind of like Mexico's Linda Moulton Howe. I'm sure you know who she is. Maybe she's been on your show before, but there's a UFO expert down there, a paranormal researcher who's had a show for like 25 or 30 years in various forms. His name is Jaime Maussan, and they got him and his crew or whatever to investigate this. And it's the first time that the government actually asked for outside help and acknowledged that there was a UFO issue going on. And what happened is they really were inconclusive. And some show from America, I don't know what channel it was on, the History Channel, Sci-Fi Channel, whatever, went down there and investigated the same thing and said that these UFOs were really the fires on top of oil platforms. And it was such a bogus thing. Like I said, I won't take sides on things normally, but I know that was BS, that it was oil platform fires. And it was like open shut case, the way Americans like things, everything's clean and done and that's it. And no more discussion. But seeing that show made me question things even more. It was ridiculous, actually. Mm-hmm. And yes, there is a Mexican Air Force, and these pilots are very highly trained, and they've logged thousands and thousands of hours. So they're as expert as any other pilots in any other military in the world. Mm-hmm. And they knew they knew that they were seeing moving objects. It was on radar, for goodness sakes. How could it be oil fires?
Viewer 1982 on the YouTube chat says, are there a lot of weird black satanic cults in Mexico?
There are quite a few, yes. And they go along the lines of, what I was saying earlier. There's that death, the holy death, the Santa Muerte, and then there's Jesus Malverde. And then there are other satanic ritual cults that are down, or groups that are down there. One that you have never heard of, probably because I've never seen any information on it in English. I read about it in a newspaper when I was flying home. And they're called the Hijos. Let's see how good your Spanish is. Hijos de Baphomet. So what does that mean?
That sounds crazy to me.
Hijos, kids, children, the children of Baphomet.
I was going to say Baphomet
is
sounds
the
familiar.
Babylonian goat.
I've seen that crazy god-looking thing like goat head and whatnot.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So the Hijos de Baphomet are responsible for ritual murders in Mexico, from what I've read, and they're hijos, the children of Baphomet. They're like college age kids and younger. And so, yeah, there's cult activity going on down there.
I thought you were going to say the Clintons there. All right. Wait a minute. What did I say?
You're a big fan of Hillary, aren't you?
Oh, no, I don't know. I don't know how that slipped out there. Okay.
I want to believe. That's good. Yeah.
Now, have you seen any UFOs yourself?
When I was a little kid, I thought I did. I don't know what they were, but we lived behind a power plant, and the UFOs were above the power plant. I was like five or six, and to the mind of a little kid, I thought that they were cleaning the air. We nicknamed them the pollution collectors.
Wow.
We thought that they were flying around making the air better, but I felt like there was something inside. They were like your typical UFO, metal discs. And I remember one time I walked outside into my backyard, and there was a big one just hovering over the power plant. And I looked at it and I started talking to it. I was like 6. And I felt like there was something there. Like maybe I knew somebody who was on board. There was some sort of like feeling there. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I tried to contact people from that neighborhood, and nobody remembers anything. Right. So I don't know what the heck that is.
Okay.
I do have a pretty good memory, so I don't know. I don't know.
All right, another question. Do you believe that some of the incantations or the black magic can attach itself to objects?
That's an interesting question. I guess it's possible, yeah. I mean, people believe that, so yeah.
Well, now I don't know about you got the cross and the vampire, you got the silver bullet and the werewolf. You may not be familiar with this, but you got orgone, which is supposed to repel reptilian aliens. But those
and also chemtrails, I think that has something to do with that.
And they also make your health, gives you hair grow out, and it also
maybe I can use that.
And also enriches your bank account. So if you got some orgone, just to get some and just put it all in your yard. And also it scares the Bigfoot. But let me ask you something. Obviously, there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings in the United States. Are there Bigfoot sightings in Mexico?
Yeah, there are 2 types of Bigfoots, or big feet, I never know what the plural is on that. There's one called the Sisamite, and that's in the more jungly areas of Mexico, the southern part, and into South America, or into Central America. And it's a kind of scrawny version of Bigfoot. And some people say that it has backwards facing feet.
Ooh.
And some people think it's magical. The ancient Maya believed that it was a part of the forest, just like a jaguar or a deer or something like that. So there's the Sisamite, and it was first reported by an outsider. A Canadian saw one, I think, in the 1890s. But then there's another type of Bigfoot called the Cuatlacas, and that's in central Mexico. A lot of people, when they think of Mexico, they think of deserts or the beach or whatever. There's alpine climate zones in Mexico. There are 3 mountains that have glaciers, permanent snowpack. And, below the snowfields, there are thick pine trees. You think pine trees, Oregon, Washington, or whatever. But in central Mexico, there are endless pine forests. And some of those forests first saw human habitation only in the 1870s.
Wow.
And yeah, so they're so thick and so unexplored that there's a possibility of a creature there. And the one that I'm thinking, this Central Mexican creature, is called the Cuatlacas. And it's your typical Bigfoot type creature, and it's angry.
Whoa.
It's always angry. You go into its territory, it throws things at you, it screams at you, whatever. It's not a benevolent creature. So.
Wow. So you are documenting a lot of these things in your book. Tell me about your book. What's in there?
The book is a compilation of 51 stories, and there it is, Mexico Unexplained. And it's based on the podcast. It's based on my independent research. A lot of the research that I do, I think I mentioned this earlier, I'm bringing a lot of this material to the English-speaking world for the first time. A lot of it's in Spanish, taken from Spanish articles, articles written in Spanish in Mexico, or broadcasts, or even police reports. There's a man-bat creature that I actually looked at police reports, describing the creature. So in the book, I have everything from ancient history and anomalies and cryptids and just the whole myths and legends, a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to come out with volume 2 later this year.
They've discovered pyramids in South America, and I don't know how many there are in Mexico, but do those pyramids, you think, predate the Great Pyramids in Egypt?
I don't think so. And, it's interesting you bring up pyramids, because people use the pyramid as I get, they think that because there are pyramids here and there are pyramids there, that there was some sort of super culture that was around the earth, that tied everything together. But if you look closely, the pyramids in Mexico itself differ. The ones in the Yucatan are different from central Mexico. And then even in central Mexico, there are different pyramids. There's a simple explanation for why the pyramid even exists, I think, in ancient cultures. Okay. How in the heck are you going to have elevation? If you want to build a tall building, how are you going to do it without a crane or a backhoe or any sort of modern equipment? You're going to do what nature does to get elevation. You have a mountain. And so and a lot of these pyramids are representations of sacred mountains. So the pyramid that you have on the screen right now, if you compare that to a pyramid in Teotihuacan, that one is called El Castillo, or the Temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza. In the Yucatan, it's Maya, post-classic Maya. Now, if you compare that to the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon at Teotihuacan, totally different, stylistically different. And then there's a site outside of Guadalajara called Huachimontones, and that has circular pyramids.
Wow.
So that's completely different from what you're seeing on the screen right now. It's just, I think, a way to get elevation. I think it's a simple explanation, but they're recent. Mm-hmm. And another thing I'd like to say too, some people say, well, were they built by giants? And if you've ever gone up one of these, like the pyramid that you're showing right there, I've climbed that. And the people who built it were not giants, because the steps are so small. They were made for people who have, like, if you're a man, a size 7 or 8 shoe, which is very similar to the people who live there now, very small in stature, at least compared to us. So giants, I don't think, built these things either. And some of these structures are massive. The pyramid in Cholula is considered by volume the biggest pyramid in the entire world. Is bigger than Giza, and it's very spread out. And how did they build it? The pyramids in Mexico, they're very simply constructed. They're made with smaller stones. And what has happened, especially in some of the older, bigger pyramids, is civilizations will come in and then add to it. So the pyramid gets bigger with time. So one of the reasons why the pyramid at Cholula is so big, massive volume, is because it's been built on top of, 4 or 5 times.
Is there anything in the center of these pyramids?
Yeah, in fact, the one that you showed, El Castillo, the Temple of Kukulkan, that's on the cover of my book, that one, when I was there in 1992, on the side of the staircase, there was a passageway, and they let tourists go in there. I don't think they do that now. I mean, they've cracked down on a lot of this stuff. But inside there was another staircase, which was from the older pyramid, and at the top of the staircase was a jade jaguar. So, and then also in Teotihuacan, there's a recent discovery that has been made, I think, in the past year, where they discovered these secret chambers under the Pyramid of the Sun, and they had liquid mercury in them, like little containers of liquid mercury.
Wow.
And nobody knows what they are. And mysterious spheres too were in there.
But still, Robert, wouldn't they have to have some sort of advanced technology to build these things? Especially if you have like center staircases. Do you think?
Sorry, I don't think so.
Man, come on! No giants, no advanced technology. Come on, man.
They're not. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say no advanced technology, no mysterious builders, no alien help, downloaded technology, no Bigfoot's building them for humans. Just regular old guys out in there grabbing some rocks and cutting them up. Huh?
If you and I had a team of 1,000 people,
Robert.
we could be building all of this stuff too. It's not like the Egyptian pyramids or some of there's like, what is it, Baalbek? There's some place in Lebanon, a huge prehistoric site that has, 40-ton blocks or 400-ton, I don't know, massive blocks. In South America, there are like Sacsayhuaman, some of these Inca and pre-Inca sites have massive blocks. But in Mexico, no, they're all small. It didn't, like I said, you have 1,000 people, we can do it.
Well, you just took the mystery out of that one, man.
Sorry to burst the bubble of all those people.
Okay, all right. Well, then we'll just leave the alien. We'll leave the alien technology for the Great Pyramid.
I'm not going to commit to anything here. An alien could have come down and helped cut the blocks with lasers or something. I don't know. I wasn't there. So we can leave some wonder there.
Okay, good. Leave some wonder there, man. What about Hollow Earth? Is there any?
Well, the Maya. The ancient Mexicans, the Maya, and then I believe the Olmecs, but the Maya for sure, and the Aztecs too. They believed in different layers of the earth, and they believed that certain gods and even man emerged from the inner earth, and they believed that the cenote, the sinkholes, the wells, in I'm talking about the Maya. That's a connection to the underworld. And same thing with the volcanoes. The volcanoes are a connection to the underworld. So the Hollow Earth, some people even, I heard a theory a few months ago for the first time that the Maya went underground. That's what happened to their civilization.
Well, I know Hawaii's getting ready to meet the underground gods. If the volcanoes is a port there, they're getting ready to meet them.
Yeah.
But now they've always sort of worshipped the volcanoes, have they not? Don't they refer to it as some kind of angry god?
Well, it depends. There's stories connected with the volcanoes in Mexico, like Iztaccíhuatl. That's the second largest mountain outside of Mexico City, and it's perpetually snowpacked. And it's a dead volcano. It's not active like Popocatépetl. I gotta say that right. Put the accent in the right place. But she's called the White Lady because it looks like with the snow, she's like laying down like Snow White or something. There are myths and legends along with these mountains. And they also believe that spirits inhabit certain places and that you have to respect the spirits. So,
well, again, I mean, is it a matter of belief or is it because they're real?
That's an awesome question. That's a great question.
I've always wondered because when you look at in Egypt the ancient figurines, like they had cat heads, or you go to the Greek culture and they had centaurs. A lot of sort of animal hybrids sort of existed.
They exist in Mexico too.
So couldn't those things have been real, and that's the spin-off of that?
Well, there's a whole strand of belief out there that we're not the first and we're not the last advanced civilization to ever inhabit the earth. And the way we are going now with chimeras, combining mouse DNA with human DNA, growing, human organs in pigs and all of this stuff, there's probably been a human animal hybrid that's been created within the past 5 or 10 years. We just don't know about it. But if civilizations rise and fall and technology comes and goes, and there has been an advanced super civilization on Earth before, then they've done the same thing too, probably. So the centaur, even things like Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god or whatever, those could have been based on chimeras, on DNA experiments of crossbreeding animals. I don't know.
There was a Mel Gibson show. I think it was called Apocalypto. I think that they depicted was it the Aztecs cutting the hearts out of live people? And was that the type of pyramid that they were doing that on?
The movie was accurate to a point. Yeah, they would take the victims up to the top of the pyramid and then take an obsidian knife and then just cut their heart out while they were alive. And they believed that they had to do that or else the sun wouldn't come up in the morning, or this wouldn't have happened. Normal, astrological things wouldn't happen. So they felt like they had to appease the gods with human blood. Huitzilopochtli was the god of war and the patron god of the Aztecs, who demanded obedience and demanded human blood. And sometimes there were ceremonies to Huitzilopochtli where thousands of people were sacrificed. They were mostly either captives in war or they were slaves who were killed.
Yeah, my favorite character in Apocalypto was a guy. I think the one of the evil guys called him Almost. I don't know what his real name was, but did you ever see that movie?
I did a long time ago, but I don't remember all the details with it. But there was a lot of accuracy to the movie.
Yeah, and I think there was something to. One of them was a prophecy that said something to the effect that their own prophecy was that a white bearded man was going to come and kill their civilization. And of course, then here comes the Spaniards, white bearded men. And but that was actually a true, a true prophecy. Actually, you could say it came true.
Maybe, maybe not. There has been recent research, what I've found, because I grew up really interested in all of this stuff, ever since I was a little kid. And I always heard the story that Quetzalcoatl, or some people say Quetzalcoatl, that he was the white bearded god who promised that he was going to return. And then when Cortez came to Mexico City, to Tenochtitlan, to the Aztec Empire's capital, they thought he was the returning god. Well, it turns out that a lot of people recently have been investigating this, and that no one can find sources from the time of the Spanish conquest or before it that show that this was an actual prophecy. The prophecy only pops up about 20 to 30 years after the conquest. And some people believe now that the Spanish were manipulating the second or third generations of Indians and saying, see, look, bearded white god was supposed to return. Hey, that's us. You better obey us. And then, and that has been morphed into Quetzalcoatl, this white feathered serpent, bearded serpent. Now it went from feathers here to a beard. Feathered serpent becomes bearded serpent, bearded white guy. And then there's a main religious group in the United States who believes that was Jesus Christ coming to the Americas because of a verse in Thomas, I think, that says, I have flock that's not of this fold that I have to tend to, or something. So a lot of people believe that Christ came to the Americas, and that was him.
So when the black satanic, well, I don't know if maybe they're not necessarily satanic cults down there, but I would think so when you get involved with black magic. But is there any known antidote if, say, somebody cast a spell? Did you ever learn? Did anybody ever tell you, if you feel like somebody put a spell on you, how to get rid of it?
See an exorcist. That's the answer pretty much for everything. You got to combat all of this dark stuff with church, with the powers of, what already exists, the structure that's already there. So yeah, that would be the advice of anybody pretty much down there, is go see a priest, get an exorcist.
DC Doug wants to know, what type of things do you import?
Mostly arts and crafts, handcrafted stuff. A lot of religious items, actually. When the economy went down, I saw that a lot of people were buying crosses and things like that. So I imported a lot of that stuff. I wasn't originally what I was getting into, but a lot of housewares. I was doing furniture for a while, big pots, things like that, a lot of collectibles. So pretty much anything unusual. And I've been doing it now since 1999. So quite a variety of things.
So in that time, all those objects that you dealt with, you feel like none of them had an attachment to them?
That's a great question, because there were some people who would come into my store and would say things about certain things and say, one woman came in, she was very, very strange woman. Her name was Valerie, I remember. Her grandmother was a witch in Albania or something, but a good witch. I don't know. She was like into white magic or whatever. And she came in and she said that she sensed some bad spirits and I needed to light candles and all of this stuff. And I don't know. It's possible. So I don't know.
All right. Well, Robert Bitto, we're right at the end of the broadcast. Anything you'd like to say about your website or your book, you go right ahead.
It's pretty simple. Mexico Unexplained. You can go to YouTube and please subscribe to my channel to get the latest videos. And also the website is mexicounexplained.com. You can go to Amazon or in your local bookstore. There's an ISB number that you can look up and get the book from any bookstore. And that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, man, if you write a sequel, man, just give me a holler here. We'll have you back on. How about that?
Great. It's been fun. Thank you for having me.
All right, Robert, I appreciate you coming on the Edge broadcast tonight. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.